Tulsa Mayor Monroe Nichols, thanks again. Third time's the charm for coming on In Depth with Dion.
That's right, man. I thought the other two were good.
They were pretty good.
Third time's the charm, like they were bad.
No, more like
dang.
take three. How about take three?
Oh, here we go.
There we go.
There we go.
So, we first spoke nearly a year ago in January,
Yeah.
a month after you've been elected, and we focused on your historic win, what you hope to accomplish for the city around housing, homelessness, crime, education, and jobs. Halfway into your first year, we talked again. That time around gun violence, your plans to repair Greenwood, honoring tribal sovereignty, protecting democracy, and a lot more. Now, for take three, I want to talk with you about what you see as the real successes of your first year, some of the near misses, what you feel like we could have done better on, and what you hope to accomplish during the rest of your term.
Sure.
Okay? So, speed round, just to kind of get us going. There was a lot that went down 2025.
Yeah.
What would you list as your most, the best, what would you list as your favorite accomplishments?
Man, so this was going to be, did you say accomplishment or with an S?
S.
Okay, so if it's an S, then we're good. I was like, man, that's tough. I think number one is how I started. I think people don't really think about this as an accomplishment, but I think the people who you bring with you into service is important. And, I appointed some really solid individuals to serve in the mayor's office to help support us as we work with the other, nearly 4,000 employees across the entire city as an organization. So the team, to me, is a real accomplishment because they had about a month in between being elected, taking office, and that kind of deal. So if you look at the folks who work there now, the things that they're doing, everything that comes after that from an accomplishment standpoint is largely enabled by those folks. And so like they themselves, that team to me is an incredible accomplishment. I think outside of that, I'm really excited about the progress we've made in a couple of different areas. So if you were to go back and look at Monroe for Mayor, the website, and it's still up and unchanged since I got elected. And if you were to look at the issues and you look at the stuff that we said that we were going to try to accomplish had I got elected to office, you can see a clear through line of the things that we've been working on. And so to this point this year on the issue of homelessness, took us some time. We got some resources moved around. We kicked off Safe Move. We're going to house 300 individuals over a 12-month period, 55 which have already been housed. We've cleaned out 2 or decommissioned 3 large-scale encampments. I'm very proud of that progress. On the housing front, we not only launched the housing tracker to help track our progress toward the 6,000 affordable units, but now we have the housing impact fund that's being stood up. Yep. That's going to go straight toward affordable housing. Gene Bullmash and the team is working really, really hard to ensure that it's not just about the $125 million, but are your internal processes going to make sure that $125 million actually leads to people's lives getting better? Because for us, the ultimate metric of success is not that we have resources. That's really important. You can't do this stuff without it.
Right.
But do our internal practices meet those resources in a place that's going to improve people's lives? And so all the background stuff that nobody probably wants to hear about, but everything from the housing acceleration team to the community builder program, so on and so forth, all these things internally we've done to change our processes to make things better is an incredible accomplishment toward that goal of 6,000 affordable units. And I'll also say, from a public safety standpoint, I know we talked about this before. I don't think we were as far down the road when I talked to you before about this, but the summer when I came here, we were in the midst of a couple of, pretty high profile shootings, homicides downtown. And not long after that stuff happened, we instituted Operation Ceasefire.
Yeah.
And what happened was over 160 illegal guns off the streets. Wow. We had about 90 felony arrests. But I think the big thing was we had 4,127 citizen interactions. There was only 7 uses of force and 1 complaint because of a verbal issue. And so this balance that's been struck on being able to enforce the law but also not infringe on people's civil liberties has been another big part of it. Within that public safety conversation has been a project that put mental health clinicians on 911 calls. They're listening to all of them. They've diverted over close to 5,000 calls from a law enforcement response to a mental health response. And so what that does is that I remember in 2020, we were having this big debate about, do you need more law enforcement? Do you need mental health services? Right. And I think it was an either or thing. I think what we've shown is that there's a place and space for both of them, but deployed appropriately. Deployed appropriately, you can address, violent crime without violating civil liberties. Deployed appropriately, you can divert these calls from law enforcement to mental health clinicians and still make sure you can create safety in a community. So again, another accomplishment that I feel very proud of. And it's not just me, it's everybody who's working at the city. The last one I would just highlight, because you said this is a lightning round, I'm taking forever to say things.
No, you're good.
The last one I would highlight is I made a commitment to get out of the courtroom as it came to the issue of our lawsuit with the Muskogee Nation. And I think we had already gotten down that road last time I talked to you, but now we're about 7 months into that relationship. And just the maturity of how those conversations have changed is there's some real technical, tough things to work through. And we're not completely there. We're darn close. But just as you see that growth, and because of that, here's an interesting through line. Because of that, our relationship with our tribal nations is completely different. They're represented on our children's cabinet. So I'm proud of, we stood up the Office of Children and Families and Children's Cabinet. Tribes are represented there. On the affordable housing front, the Cherokee Nation is working with us on affordable housing. On one of our TIF, or one of our economic development projects, the Muskogee Nation is working with us on that. And so, it's not just showing up on the issue of public safety, it's showing up in other areas. And then the final thing I would say, I don't know if I may have said the final thing before, but this is the real final thing I'll say as far as a start. I am really proud of getting the Greenwood Trust stood up and finding a pathway forward. We got a lot of work to do on it, but I'm proud that we've gotten that done and found someone to lead it who's a stud. Elena Beverly's a stud, and she's doing an amazing job. And so as I think about walking into office December 2nd of 2024, if I were to take December 2nd, 2024, December 2nd of 2025, if you'd have told me we'd have been in the spot that we were when I hit that 1 year mark, or even to today, I would have been pleased. And so right now I'm pleased. I'm not satisfied. We got a lot of work to do, but I am pleased so far.
I mean, it's not every day that you take the reins of the largest city in the country that is fully within a tribal reservation boundary, and lead with partnerships while the state governor is, creating division.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would have to agree that, those are some notable accomplishments for 1 year in for any mayor.
Yeah, no, it's been great. And like I said, it starts with the team. And it also starts with so many people who supported me when I was running. And there's part of this work when you get in it that I always said, when I was growing up, one of the reasons I never got in a whole lot of trouble is I always had somebody to disappoint, like my grandfather, my mom, whatever. And I feel the same way as mayor. There's so many people who took a chance on me when I was running for mayor because I was not a favorite to win. And I think about those people. And their expectation was that we went and did the things that we said we were going to do. That's why I take so much pride in the consistency from campaign life to serving. Not perfect. We've not accomplished everything we want to accomplish by any stretch. Also not mistake-free. But I hope that, what's been demonstrated to those folks who took a shot on us is that we've taken what we talked about and we've applied it to the work in the mayor's office, and we've stayed true to it. And I hope that people feel that, because that in and of itself will be an accomplishment for me.
Absolutely. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. Looking back, housing and homelessness were central to your campaign. And, of course, you've been moving full steam ahead on those initiatives. How do you assess Tulsa's progress on affordable housing? You kind of talked about it. But what I really want to ask you about is when it comes to addressing homelessness, right? A lot of the effort is focused on after they become homeless, right? But I know a lot of people are wondering, do you think the conversation has adequately addressed how rent increases, the cost of rent, and evictions might be playing a role in homelessness as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I signed an executive order, I think, in March. And that executive order laid out kind of our strategy around homelessness and where our priorities were going to lie. And there's 4 buckets, if you will, that strategy addressed. One was the decommission of encampments, which we've started. And in the way we think about it, it's not you come and just make everybody leave. It's that you spend some time getting to know the people that are there, understand what they need, and then making sure you connect them to where they need to be, get them housed, get them connected, and then close off an area. So that was one of them. The next two were very similar but not the same. One was around increasing our shelter capacity overall, which is the detention center that we're partnering with the Zero Foundation, the county on, out off Charles Page out west. And so we know we need some additional shelter capacity, and then specifically a winter weather shelter because, not long after I got elected, we had that negative 11-degree weather, and we had to scramble to find a place like 1,400 people to be, and it was tough to do. The cornerstone of that was like basically one shelter that could house up to 250 was a key and critical part of it. We could about get everybody else from an emergency standpoint, but there's a delta there of about 200, 250, 300 people that there's nowhere for them to go, and that's a lot of people to be out on the streets. And then the fourth pillar of that, and that's the winter weather shelter that Cree Oaks and Be Heard are partnering on out east. The fourth pillar of that was around eviction mitigation, and so we've had a group that's been meeting that includes renters themselves, landlords, service providers, even the apartment association, which is not normally engaged on that conversation, is in it with us now. Really working to figure out how do we mitigate evictions, because the one challenge that we have, there's some places, some cities that can really do rent ceilings and that kind of stuff. We're preempted by state law. We can't even do that kind of stuff. So we recognize we got to find some innovative solution that fits Tulsa. So part of it is the work we're doing on the affordable housing side. We know we need more stock out there. It's going to help drive down costs, right? But the other part is finding the policies that we need to put in place to ensure that evictions don't happen as best as we can. What's really interesting, kind of a cousin to this issue, is I think the number is north of 80%. I can't remember if it's 85 or 88% of the folks who fall into homelessness every year. 85% of them, their issues could be resolved with some sort of rapid resolution, which tells me a lot of it is initially financial, but you can't afford to pay rent. But if we could help you get rent paid, you would never fall into it. So the 3,100 people that fall into it every year, 80% of that could be resolved through rapid resolution. So we do believe, frankly, that rent and housing costs, the data bears it out, 46% of people in this community are cost burdened by it, is an issue. But we also recognize the constraints we have as it relates to state law. So we know that SOC's important, but we also know supports are always going to be important. If COVID taught us a lot of things. Right. But one of the things it taught us is that you can stabilize people in place, and stabilizing people in place is actually good for the economy. And what most landlords will tell you is evictions are expensive. And what we also know from the data is that we have some large evictors in our community, and it's not necessarily a fair kind of example of landlords across the board. And so it's also how do you work with a scalpel to figure out where do we have challenges, and then what can you do in those cases to make sure you can mitigate the onslaught of evictions. I mean, we're top 15 in the country. We got to get off that list, and we're focused on that.
I hear you. Well, I think I missed that fourth pillar, and I am glad to see that
it's in there.
It's in there, and that you're getting perspective from people, from renters, from all sides. I think that's important.
Absolutely, because one of the things, and I think this is what has been really neat about the team we have, but also people from the community who've really we've worked with a lot. Because as much as I would like to say, man, we got all the answers, we don't. You really got to get it from people who are most impacted by it. For sure. And you got to have landlords and renters sitting in the same room. We got to have an honest conversation about what's going on here, right? Most of the time, though, I think this has been true. The issue's been, we can't do any sort of rent controls because of state law, so we can't touch that. It's not true. There's other things that we can do. Now, those answers might not be as obvious to us as others are, but it doesn't mean that we can't get them done. And so that eviction mitigation group that is what they're talking about. Is what is going to be the Tulsa solution given all the constraints that we have. Mm-hmm. We recognize that evictions or lack of affordable housing, however you want to couch the issue, is one of the greatest economic threats to this community. And if we don't do something about it, we're always going to be lagging behind. And so we got to figure out some solutions.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad to hear that, work is being done on
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
I wanted to go to the Greenwood Trust. Surrounded by loved ones and community members, Mother Viola Ford Fletcher, the oldest living survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre, passed away at 111 years
Yeah.
old on November 24th of 2025. As mayor, you announced the Greenwood Trust, a city initiative aimed at using private funding to provide 105 million towards housing, cultural preservation, land acquisition, educational scholarships, and business development incentives for the Greenwood community and descendants. Can you give us an update? What's the status of the trust and the effort?
Yeah, so Lena Beverly is now executive director of the trust. We are in the midst of recruiting a national board of advisors, which is going to be mixed between local and national, and recruiting the other trustees as well as raising the private capital. I mean, raising $105 million is a tough thing to do, but we feel really good about it. And, we've had a lot of really good conversations with folks nationally. And I think, are still very optimistic about the ability to deliver on it. I think what's really interesting is we've talked to some of the national folks who are interested in the Greenwood story. What has been kind of a neat sort of emerging kind of feel within those spaces is that the rest of the country has been having a much different conversation about race and equity and those types of things, right? We're having a very, pretty aggressive conversation about it, where you're talking about in the tribal standpoint, or the history of black folks in this community, whatever it might be. Like
Absolutely.
We're actually doing it, and we're doing it in a way that, frankly, hasn't been, as emotionally charged, because it's just like, hey, these are just truths that we got to address. But what has been an interesting development is there's been a lot of people who've gone after these efforts, and a lot of them been sued for whatever different reasons. The Greenwood Trust in of itself is probably going to end up being a model for how you do kind of reparative economics across the country. And so there's a lot of folks who certainly are interested in the Greenwood story, but there's a lot of folks who are interested in investing because they want to see if this can work. Can it really change outcomes in a place for a portion of the population? And I think the answer is going to be yes. And I say that I maintain the great thing about the trust is the three kind of buckets of areas that the trust it was really designed to do work in. Right. Were all recommended by descendants. Like there weren't things that, because I didn't campaign on creating a Greenwood Trust. It was not something like, I knew it was important that we did something, but like the idea of the trust itself was not an idea until after I took office and kind of was faced with some of the recommendations and really wanting to do something that was going to be durable over a long period of time. And so I feel good about where we are right now. We got a lot of work to do. We're still in the planning year for the trust. But I think come June 1st, I'm not sure we'll have the whole 105 raised by June 1st, but I think by June 1st, we'll have a sizable portion of it raised or committed, but the work of the trust would have started in some of those areas. And so, like, if you think about it, just functionally speaking, it's going to be a lot quicker for us to launch programming around scholarships and business grants and business loans, because that's a lot quicker. Housing takes a little bit longer. You got land acquisition and those kind of things make it a little tougher. The cultural preservation stuff probably takes a little bit longer because you want community input and what that looks like. So some of those things they're going to take a little bit longer for us to get the programming around it. But the trust will start portions of its work by June 1st, and we're still really excited about it.
Wow, that's wild. I know when you announced it, there was a lot of different thoughts about it.
Sure.
People who were, wholeheartedly behind it.
Yeah.
People who maybe supported the idea but didn't think it was actually gonna become, turn into fruition.
100%.
So that's exciting to hear that. By June 1st, we can have a pretty notable update at the very least.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was always gonna take some time, but like from my standpoint, I think this is true about everything that we do. A lot of people don't think 6,000 affordable units is going to be possible in 4 years. A lot of people don't think you can get to functional zero homelessness in 6 years. There's a lot of people who think that, but the thing is, when you kind of involve yourself in the work and you get good people to go along, and those folks begin to talk to other people about whatever that story might be. And I think this is true with the Greenwood Trust. And we have some really exciting things that we are going to have here for Black History Month. I'm really excited about. But what you begin to find is there are a lot of people who are like, like a light bulb goes off. It's like, oh yeah, there is a different way of doing this stuff in ways we haven't thought before. And that is what really excites me every day. What I hate about it in some ways, and I certainly feel a level of I don't know. I'm not sure that I would say it was guilt, but a certain level of like a missed opportunity in some ways. That let's see, Uncle Rit, he passed away as I was campaigning for mayor. Yeah. Mother Fletcher obviously just passed away recently. I mean, I was just barely over a year in, I guess, before we were down to one, and so the opportunity to do something significant for them as individuals is something that I think I'll look back on and say, man, I wish timing was different. Mm-hmm. But it does in some ways deepen your resolve. Thinking about those folks, and certainly Mother Randall's still around, but thinking about those folks and knowing that they spent their last years on this this journey toward justice, and I'm not sure that any of us should feel the weight to finish the entire race ourselves, but they did hand us a baton, and we do need to advance the work. And advancing the work for me in this moment right now is making sure that the trust gets stood up, and we begin the work that we said we were going to do.
Wow. Well, I agree with you when it comes to Tulsa being an example. I think it has been an example in the way that the community has made sure that this issue didn't get buried.
Yeah.
And as someone who I definitely didn't know Mother Fletcher as well as a lot of other people, but as someone who got to talk with her and meet with her a few times before she passed, I know that she felt some type of way, in a good way, of the acknowledgement that was finally taking place.
Man, did you go to her funeral in Bartlesville?
I didn't make the funeral.
I'm telling you. So the only reason I mentioned that, because if you're there, you would. But for you and for the people who weren't there, the thing what was amazing about it, because I didn't know who she was. She was 107.
Right.
I had no idea. I mean, I didn't know her at all.
Of course.
But to hear the people in Bartlesville who just didn't know she was a race massacre survivor, just knew her as like kind of a pillar in the community there in Bartlesville, to talk about the kind of person that she was. It's like it was never for show. She was just always the same type of a person, and what that's left in me is like thinking, man, here's this lady who has a phenomenal story, who never necessarily led with that until she knew there was a greater purpose to use that story, and that's what she did. So even when she brought that story to the forefront, it was not about Viola Ford Fletcher. It was about the folks who came before. It was about the people who would come after. And I just think there's something amazing about the story. They were telling me, and I don't know, you may have heard this too. Maybe you heard this in the conversations there. I didn't know this. She did the shipbuilding, I guess, during the war.
Rosie the Riveter.
And somebody asked her, like why? Why'd you do that, given what happened to you? And she said that she didn't necessarily do it for the country. She did it because her brother was in the Navy, and she wanted him to come home. And if he was going to do that she was going to. I was like, who is this woman? This is an amazing being, And so I think about people like that. Like, I think the world knew her as this race massacre survivor, which is significant. She was such a deep thinker and filler, and we just lost somebody on this earth who was just an amazing human. And I didn't know who she was till she was 107. I wish I would have known her, for 42 years of my life. Yeah. But the time that I did get to spend with her, just an absolutely amazing soul.
I did get to make it to the celebration of life in
Tulsa.
In Tulsa.
Yeah.
And,
it was a good one.
I'll be honest, like let me be real for a minute. Like, when I found out about her passing, of course I was sad, but I was also angry.
Yeah, sure.
Because the previous administration had opportunities to do something when there was more time, and the state has had 20 years that state commission report has been collecting dust. And so, but when I came to the celebration of life, and her grandson Ike was talking about her, she led with love, you
Yeah,
know.
that's
and
right.
I don't know how someone could go through that and still lead with love, but she
That's
did.
right. That's exactly right.
You know, and it gave me goosebumps because like she didn't carry herself with anger,
That's right.
but there's still power in carrying yourself with love.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think that's beautifully said. I mean, I think because I've thought about that too, just the time it takes, and I hate to talk about it in that context because it makes it seem like, oh yes, I'm the person who came and finally did something. I don't think it's that. I think we have been in a space for a long time in this country where certain things happen that are so bad people don't know how to apologize and make it right. It's too hard to look somebody in the eye and admit, yeah, we did that wrong. And it's easier to do it. I've heard people talk about, oh, we had Japanese internment camps. We figured it out for them, and we did this for all these other folks. It was because you really didn't have to live among them and look them in the eye and know that I was the person who did this to you. So that's a really, really hard thing to do. And to your point, the only thing that's ever broke into that is when we approach those conversations with a certain amount of love, a certain amount of humility, certain amount of understanding. You still got that anger and frustration, but that's always going to continue that divide. And so I would say my predecessor, his predecessor, everybody's predecessor, like it was very difficult to have that conversation, but we have to decide what we're going to do now and think about that. Because I think that, honestly, if you kind of look at the record, there have been, I think Susan Savage maybe was the first mayor to maybe formally apologize, which at the time was a really big thing. I think the John Hope Franklin Reconciliation Park was completed, I think, under Mayor Taylor, which is, just another movement of the deal. I think the changing of the street from Tate Brady to Matthew Brady, whatever it is, maybe small steps. I think that was Mayor Bartlett, if I'm not mistaken. And Mayor Bynum, I mean, to his credit, Graves' investigation, probably not the easiest thing to do if you're a white Republican guy, but, he did,
That's fair.
Kicked out the Kirkpatrick Heights work. And so I think what you have are folks who've had this recognition, but just don't know what to do about it. There hadn't been a lot of great examples of how do you do it? It's just the weight of it all, just the sheer weight of it all, right?
Yeah.
And so there's part of me that, sees the Greenwood Trust and what we're doing now as not necessarily, we're the first people to ever think that something had to be done in the mayor's office. Maybe it's just the timing has hit us, and I, as a black man, can have the types of conversations that maybe other people were not comfortable having. But that means that you got to level up and take the next big steps. And so, I think that it's been a hard time getting here as a city. We still got a lot of work to do. But I do approach it even with a certain level of humility myself, because I'm not a child of Greenwood. I'm not a descendant. And so I think there's also part of me where it's like, man, you got to make sure you're doing the right thing, because there are people's stories, there's people's heritage, their legacy that's all tied up in this. And we have to be with a great degree of humility and know that in some ways, as maybe inadequate as it may have been, there have been people who sat in my office who have made some contributions in getting us there. And I think ultimately, if you think about the weight of the massacre, the Greenwood Trust, although I think is incredible and the work it's going to do over the years is going to be incredible, it is also in some ways inadequate given what happened, because there's a bunch of people who lived and died, we're down to one, who never had anything happen. There's no adequacy about making that right. We can only figure out like what can we possibly do to the best we can moving forward. That's what we're trying to do.
I hear you. So I want to move on to open records. So an executive order first signed by former Mayor G.T. Bynum added increased fees for open records requests deemed an excessive disruption. It was defined as requiring more than an hour of a city employee's time. You campaigned on transparency, and you've shown a level of transparency and access that we haven't always seen in past administrations. But this executive order is still in place. And as a journalist, I can tell you it has had an impact on my work. So in May of last year, just really quickly, there was a road rage incident here in Tulsa. A short black queer woman named Mashaya Moses was killed, and an older white man was the other a party to that road rage incident. Now, police claim she was following him, and her family, who I interviewed, says that their destinations overlapped and that he didn't realize she was going to the same destination, the same like neighborhood. Police ultimately declined to file charges. There wasn't enough evidence for them to file charges, and they cited self-defense. So really, it was a he say, she say, and you have a responding officer who did do interviews. Now, when I reached out asking for the police body cam of those interviews, that's when I was told that this was an excessive disruption, and they were trying to charge me over $700 for it. And so my question is, as mayor, would your office be willing to revisit that order by either eliminating or modifying it in the interest of transparency?
I'd be happy to look at it to modify it. I mean, here's the challenge that we have, and not necessarily unique, like it's not this case necessarily, but what happens is oftentimes there's a couple of, I won't say bad actors, a couple people who request a lot of things, and they do it because it's easy to request it. And I think oftentimes people think, oh, I can just go get it and it's easy to produce, and they snap a finger and it happens. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, there's oftentimes where it takes a significant amount of staff time to do things, to redact certain things that have to be redacted from a record because we can't just give them clean for whatever reason. You know, there's a whole bunch of reasons why. Right. In some cases, and that's why there's a real reason why. Now, I do think, I mean, I would be happy to revisit it, but I'm sure I'm going to hear some of that. I actually do think, though, we are getting to a place, and, you know, as much as I get freaked out about AI and stuff like that, where even the open records issue becomes a lot easier to be able to produce things a lot quicker with less staff time. Because, you know, the quicker you're able to redact things where it doesn't take somebody manually doing it, the quicker you're able to produce things, the less amount of time it takes. Because what happens is you don't just have one request for body cam. You may have 1,000 requests for body cams across the city. I'm not saying you shouldn't request it. It's not going to come quick. It's going to take a lot of time, and that's the reason why some of those fees are in place. And then you have some people who are like, I'm just going to request things and request things and request things. And there's a couple ways you mitigate that, right? Part of it is like, all right, what are some things that we can open source so people don't have to ask us for it? Like, just don't even ask us for it. Give us 6 weeks and you can find it somewhere. Yeah, you know what I mean? So there's things like that. So I will say I'll be happy to revisit the executive order. I can't promise that revisit means there's a immediate change to it, because I do think there are times where it is real, and the minute that you say, okay, no, we're not charging for it anymore, it actually ties up the time that we have for people. We need them to do other things. And so I mean, I think it is certainly, if it is a clear barrier to transparency, which you know you don't want, then yeah, I'd be happy to revisit it. I actually haven't looked at the executive order, but I mean, like, there's a lot of them that we have either launched or getting ready to update. So I'd be happy to look at it. Absolutely. I mean, you know, my big thing is I don't have anything to hide, and if I did, the problem that always happens is when you hide it. You know, I mean, the issue itself is never the thing that ever gets you. It's the intent around trying to conceal the thing. And I think, you know, we've demonstrated that in a few areas. They're willing to, you know, get things out in the public. I mean, you know, going back to the race massacre, the 41,000 pages of documents that we had. I mean, absolutely. My deal's like, I don't know what's in there, but, you know, you all take a look. And so I do think that people's tolerance for things when they don't go the right way is way higher when you're transparent. Like, because I think context is always key. Yeah. I think sometimes the natural inclination is, this is when I was a kid, I get a bad report card. I'm trying to hide it. I hope she didn't know it was 6 weeks mark. But that didn't help.
Turn that D to a B.
Man, you know what I mean? Forge a signature. It's no big deal. But what I found is that didn't get me any closer to being successful in life. I mean, I was just afraid I was going to get a whooping. I guess I can say that. My mom shooting me. Like, it was a beating. It wasn't a whooping. I ain't never been whooped in my life, been beaten in my life. But I mean, so for me, like, I'm very comfortable with things being open. I do want to make sure we protect information that needs to be protected. There probably is an overcorrection sometime. We get sued, just like everybody else does. But I'd be happy to revisit it, 100%. I can commit that to you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That. I understand there's a balance that needs to be had between protecting privacy and sensitive information and transparency. So just even looking at it, I think.
Yeah, I'm happy to look at it and get recommendations from the team, and I'll share those recommendations back with you. Is just in the air and a note of transparency.
Hey.
I'll get everything in. I'll get a staff recommendation, whatever the recommendation is, whether I choose to follow it or not. I'll make sure you get it.
Well, I respect that. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So I want to move on to a new law that the state has passed that is having implications across the state. So a new cannabis DUI related law is in effect in Oklahoma.
Hey, man, I'm not a legislator anymore.
And look, we're not blaming you for the law, but there are some people who are worried, especially the thousands of medical marijuana patients in Tulsa, about how this is being enforced. So it treats cannabis the same as alcohol in the vehicle. The changes are causing panic among some people who worry it criminalizes patients in a state that has, I just looked it up, the most medical marijuana patients per 100,000 residents.
Oh, yeah, by far.
In the country.
By far.
So
by far.
What the law does, Senate Bill 786, it allows officers to press DUI charges against drivers if they are smoking while driving, of course, if their passenger is smoking, even if they're not smoking, secondhand smoke, if they have cannabis in the car and it's not in its original container, not locked in the trunk. And so on its face, these seem reasonable. The bill sponsor and supporters said that, we have a problem with traffic accidents related to multiple drugs and alcohol being in the person's system. And Oklahoma has long made it illegal to smoke while driving, to be high while driving. The first offense is a misdemeanor, fine $250 and a possible license suspension, like as a DUI.
Like a DUI.
So here's the kicker. When it comes to alcohol, we have the science behind how much that limit is before you should not be behind the wheel. But when it comes to cannabis, the science hasn't been the research hasn't caught up with usage. And so currently, Oklahoma law states that if you have even a trace of THC, any metabolites in your system while driving, you are driving illegally.
Whew.
And so I guess my question is, for the thousands of Tulsa residents who legally purchase medical marijuana, they can be pulled over and charged with a DUI, even if they've gone days or weeks without smoking. Do you have any concerns about this law, the burden it could put on officers, the disparities it might create in the community?
Sure. Yeah, I got plenty of concerns about it. I mean, I hope, and they're going to go to session this next year. This is one that stuck by me. I actually didn't know that. Was this last session?
It was last session. It just went into effect a few weeks ago.
And so November 1st went into effect. This is one that stuck by me. I actually did not know that the law changed in that way. It definitely is concerning. And I would be concerned if I was a smoker. I'm not a smoker. I'm not a medical marijuana patient. I don't smoke. I mean, I think we all know about drinking and driving, to your point of like what that legal limit is and those types of things. But yeah, I think I'd be concerned. I think you're always concerned too about the administration of justice. And to be clear, you can be concerned about that even if you think an officer is acting in good faith, right? Because it's just where you happen to be and who you happen to pull over. And if you're in places where the perception is they need a greater deployment of resources,
like they didn't write the law, they're just
and those people, just because you happen to be there, disproportionately going to be writing tickets in particularly one part of the city or another. I could commit to getting more information, seeing if maybe there's some cleanup language that can come behind that bill. Also, I'd be really curious to know of the accidents that we have here. How many of those are with folks with anything in their system? It actually kind of gets me on wanting to pull some data on that because I don't know the answer to that.
That's a good question.
And I don't believe that sometimes every once in a while we get asked about our opinion on a piece of legislation as a city or as a department, and the best I can tell, we weren't asked if we had an opinion about it one way or the other. So I'd be really curious to know where it originated from. I do know there's a lot of folks, not just in Oklahoma City at the Capitol, but across the state who, to your point, say, man, we are producing more marijuana than we need. We have a lot of illegal grow operations and yada, yada, yada. I'm not sure that punishing the patient is how you deal with those things. But my guess is that's probably where something like that originated from. Is like this idea we gotta crack down medical marijuana. It's like, well, I mean, maybe not on the patients, and I think the science certainly needs to catch up so you can figure out what's that appropriate amount. I think it does put officers in a horrible position. So it's like, you're making a judgment call, which they make a lot of judgments call. But I mean, I would argue, that probably should be revisited or maybe amended in some way so there would be some clarity for folks who rely on it for medical purposes.
And I know some had asked me about options for cities to choose how they enforce or even decriminalize. And I know that the state loves to preempt cities.
Yeah, the preemption laws are tough. And I mean, and so sometimes too, if you're not preempted yet, if you're not careful, you will get preempted another way. But I do think it always, just like, on the rent control deal, right? Mm-hmm. The question then becomes, how are we putting people in this community in a position to be successful, be safe, be economically viable in case of affordable housing?
Right. And
so I think that, obviously, we are sworn, if you're in the police department, to enforce the laws of the country and laws of the state. But I do think, how does that play out? For example, if somebody is arrested, charged with, I guess it would be a DUI. Is that the crime category D? Would drive under the influence?
Yes.
Yeah. And they end up in municipal court. Mm-hmm. How are we addressing cases like that? Right, for the individual, and making sure that you're not just having a bunch of people who had basically took their medicine and were fine to drive, but letter of the law we're not. Like, how do you address that in municipal court? Right. Hopefully we don't see a whole lot of it coming through municipal court, but I think we also have this opportunity on diversion programs that we even use for folks who are drug addicted. The folks who are using for medicine, how we apply the law from a punishment standpoint or accountability standpoint, I think is a way in which we can mitigate some of the negative challenges.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I know that I think now that you've heard about it, I think you'll hear about it more.
I bet I will.
For sure.
I bet I will. I'm actually surprised I haven't heard more about it.
I mean, I'm just starting to see it over social media, different cases. One mom posted about their kid getting pulled over, and so I think the more that it's enforced, the more conversations will start to happen.
I do think, with, and I'm sure you do this, but like for people who are listening or watching, I do think it's also important that you I didn't say, maybe not you directly, but I think you do have a voice. So it does help, like, to help to understand, here is the person that you should call, the author of the bill or whatever, mm-hmm. and build advocacy around that. Because I'm the mayor of the second largest city in the state. I was a state legislator. I actually did not know that the law had changed. I'm embarrassed to admit I did not know that, which, I mean, I know a lot of laws went into effect, but I think making sure people know how to communicate, how to advocate is really, really important. I can't tell you how many folks, I was a legislator, who reached out to me, personal email, whatever the case may be, who told me about something that I did not know, that then inform my conversation. Because I can have a different conversation with legislators if I'm one of them, right? That inform my conversation with the bill author or whatever. And you'll find that a lot of people, we get a lot of laws that we're passing that are based on, perception or what people think. Mm-hmm. Educate lawmakers just like you'd educate anybody else, and you'll be amazed to see how many things that you can change if you come to it from a place of like, hey, let me educate you on the impact that this has. Yeah. You may have wanted it to do this one thing, but the impact is, we have all these people getting pulled over, getting DUIs who can't afford them or whatever. It's flooding the municipal court system or the district court system over folks who should not be going to court, like all those things, right?
Right.
Because on one end, and we've, as a state, been kind of going back and forth on this, but we have been a state where some criminal justice reform legislation has been successful. Mm-hmm. And so we still have a little bit of that DNA in with us, even though the majority is a majority. And so, like, I do think that that's still a solid argument about, do we want to overburden our court systems, and do we want to overburden law enforcement on something that we're not sure at what level, at what degree it actually causes the kind of things we want to prevent? Because I don't know the answer to that, and I imagine a lot of people don't.
Well, that's fair. I feel like we have gone back and forth. At the beginning of this year, our prison population did rise slightly, mm-hmm. but we also recently passed the Sentencing Modernization Act, to try and reduce some of the older prisoners'
Yeah.
times
Yeah.
and lower the prison rate. So for those who want to advocate, the bill author is Senator Darrell Weaver out of Moore, Oklahoma. And so if you are looking to share your perspective about the impact that you believe this cannabis DUI law is having or will have, Senator Darrell Weaver of Moore, Oklahoma is who you want to reach out to. So now I want to move on to tribal sovereignty. We've talked earlier, Tulsa is the largest city in the nation to fully reside within tribal reservation boundaries, Muskogee Nation, Cherokee Nation, Osage Nation. Your administration negotiated a historic agreement with the Muskogee Nation to send municipal cases involving tribal citizens to their court, which many viewed as a major step toward honoring tribal sovereignty. Now, at the same time, freedmen descendants whose ancestors were free and formerly enslaved tribal members who helped build the Muskogee Nation and Black Wall Street say they continue to be left out. So for those who may not be familiar, in June 2025, the Muskogee Nation Supreme Court affirmed freedmen citizenship in a historic ruling, but the implementation of it has been delayed.
Yeah.
Now, I spoke with Rhonda Grayson, one of the plaintiffs in the case. She's hopeful. She expressed she urged patience and to allow the process to play out, and she's pretty adamant that citizenship will be granted.
Yeah.
And of course, Principal Chief David Hill had said that they are working on amending their codes,
Yeah.
and that it takes time. What do you say to freedmen descendants right now in Tulsa who still feel like second-class citizens?
Yeah, so I think it's important to separate the two issues because they are separate. So even if, because the same is true in Cherokee Nation, which they have, resolved their freedmen, citizenship issue in Cherokee Nation several years ago. But even freedmen, in the eyes of Cherokee Nation, are not native citizens in the eyes of the federal government when it comes to litigation. And so the settlement with the Creek Nation has nothing to do at all with the issue of freedmen citizenship within Muskogee Nation. So like they're two separate things. I get why people felt maligned by our effort, because I think they felt like, well, we should be included in this settlement. It's just a completely different deal, because again, what we're working off of is the treaty that said that the reservations were never disestablished, and that's the federal designation of who the federal government says is Indian. Right. And I think it's actually by blood, and so it's a little bit different than the freedmen issue, and so I just would lift that up. And I understand why people feel like they do, and I've not been someone who said you're wrong, because like I'm not wading into why people are wrong, but in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the settlement versus this move toward citizenship, and this is something that the Cherokee Nation has been working to change at the federal level, by the way. So there is an effort, and we're very supportive of that effort of the Cherokee Nation, which would then apply to any other freedmen of any other tribe with the same designation. What I would say to freedmen who feel left behind is, I understand it. And I mean, I think this has been the Black experience in America for a very, very long time. And, I think Rhonda is right in a lot of ways. Like, you have to let these things play out, knowing that the time to do it was a long time ago. But we just are where we are at this point. And so like I feel a certain level of empathy for those who are waiting, because when I've talked to Rhonda, what's interesting is I've had some of these discussions with Chief Hill, and he's someone who very much is believes in preserving history and those types of things of the Muskogee Nation. When I talk to Rhonda, she's someone who believes in, the traditions of the Muskogee Nation. It always is amazing to me when we think about this tension that we have between peoples, how similar peoples end up being who may seem like they're diametrically opposed to each other. And so I do feel very confident that Muskogee Creek freedmen will be citizens of the nation. I mean, the Supreme Court says so. Mm-hmm. But I also feel like the times are changing where that is just what Muskogee Nation citizens think is the right thing to do. And so I think that's tough. We know that was true in this country for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that this is any different. I mean, it's a significant and sizable change, like I said, that should have happened, in my opinion, outsider looking in, a long time ago. But I think the signs of progress are there. And, you know, I hope that, you know, the relationship that I've built with the Muskogee Nation will help that along for what it's worth. But I am confident, based on my conversations with folks at the Muskogee Nation, that, you know, this is something that, again, it may take some time, but it'll happen. And I think, you know, we all got to say, you're not wrong to feel like you feel as freedmen.
Yeah.
I'm not in a position to tell you that at all, because I don't think that you are. My grandfathers were both born within 70 years, I think, of the Emancipation Proclamation. Both lived into their 80s. So, like, if you rewind their lifetimes back one lifetime, they're slaves in South Texas. My mom and dad were born before the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. That's my mom and my dad were born before, not like my grandparents. My mom and my dad were born before those two things. You know, progress takes a lot of time. And you got to believe there are good people on the other side of progress who just have not found their voice or not had that moment where they look in the mirror and make a decision about what the right thing is to do. But I think that is changing, and I think that's a really good thing. I wish it would have happened a long time ago, but I think we are where we are, and we're in a good place where we can talk about unity and progress together. And I think the Muskogee Nation is going to be one of those places where we'll have another good example of what that means moving forward, even if, you know, there are folks who might rightfully acknowledge things should have changed a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to writing a story about that. That citizenship application being processed and finalized. And you're absolutely right. The Federal Major Crimes Act is what classifies freedmen as as non-Indians. And so that's what needs to change as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's some energy around it. That'll take some time too. Mm-hmm. And I think for me as mayor, and I hope this is, you know, I hope folks understand this about me, because when I was a legislator, I was probably a bit more outspoken on certain issues because of the role, and you can speak in a different way because you're there to bring sort of a level of, you know, a profile to issues that are important to you, important to people in your community. As mayor, I've stayed very much focused on running the city really, really well. Mm-hmm. And so you hear less about how I might feel about certain issues, but always know my values are unchanged. You never have to guess where I am on something. And you should also know that while maybe I'm not as vocal outwardly, I have a great relationship with all the people who are involved, or a relationship with all the people involved. And we are always working on those issues behind the scenes, but do it in a way that, you know, gives people plenty of room to lead the way. I'm not Muskogee Creek. I'm not Creek Freedman. I'm just a mayor hoping that folks are able to unite. And so I'm not going to jump out in the front of something like that, because that's for them to come together on, right? I think it's even true in the Greenwood Trust. I made the announcement because we came up with the framework for it, and I happened to be mayor. But the ideas were not my ideas. The ideas came from descendants. When it comes to the issue of homelessness, the things that we're doing are not based on a hunch that I have. It's based on the best practice that we have, and we've put it in the hands of experts. That's true for public safety, housing, so on and so forth, and on down the line. And so, you know, in part for me, it's not just about, you know, not being a kind of a firecracker about every issue. It's just about making sure that we always put ourselves in a position where folks can go to bed at night knowing competent people are working really, really hard on their behalf, and knowing that whether it's a good day or a bad day, or things are tense or things are calm, whatever the case may be, we're going to continue to wake up and do our job and know that we're there for you. So I think that I've probably taken some criticism on some issues for not being as vocal, but it doesn't bother me because I always appreciate it because that means people are paying attention, people are engaged in issues. And if they have criticisms, all their criticisms are fair. It's the hardest thing about being mayor. Anybody criticize you is like a fair criticism, right? Because it's based on how they feel. It's the kind of city they want, kind of community they want. And they're voicing that. And I think that's sometimes it can be, a little disheartening until you realize you live in a community where people care.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't come at it the same way, but they care. And that's better than being in a place where people don't give a shit. And that's how I feel about it.
That's fair. And, it is refreshing to live in a city where the leaders are competent, as opposed to a nation where they're not. So I have one last question for you. This is the real tough one. So before we wrap, I have to ask you about this.
Okay.
A satirical article from the Oklahoma Gaslight accused you of being a thirst trap mayor, claiming Tulsans are experiencing impure thoughts during city updates. Quote, "There is no way a man stands like that, framed like that, without knowing exactly what he's doing. Those are thirst traps. Don't take me wrong, I'm super straight, but seeing the mayor like that makes me want to feel held." Your thoughts?
I thought it was pretty funny. The first person to send that to me was my mother. And so getting something like that from your mom is like a weird thing. But I think it's pretty funny. I guess it's what comes along with being mayor. I looked the same for like most of my life. I wore the same clothes from the time I was like 10 to 42. I guess like now.
They're noticing.
I guess so. I mean, look, I think it's a greater indictment on GT and Mayor Bartlett and Bill Fortune. I mean, I'm like, man, I don't know.
I mean, well, you're one of the youngest mayors.
Yeah.
You're the first black mayor.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're new to a lot of people. To be
honest.
honest.
I guess that's true. Yeah, it's like, oh man, look at him out there in the wild. Dude. You didn't even know that.
So I guess you do need to get with your team and maybe look at being more careful. So you're not causing any impure thoughts in the city.
Yeah. You know what? Once again, I will say when I was younger, I didn't know who the mayor was in my town. So, like, I guess if that helps people get more engaged, that's a good thing. But I will say, I do think that what I liked about, like, so many things that I see right now, even like some of the stories I see, is that we have the opportunity here with the leaders that we have, and it's not just me. I mean, like, literally leadership, elected leadership, non-elected leadership, where although the country around us at times is not a place where you can take the time to laugh, and definitely you can't laugh about leaders and all that kind of stuff, where we can do that. How good does it feel to be in a community where we can laugh about that kind of stuff, And so I take it more of as a badge of honor that we're not arguing or litigating, should we be investing in homelessness or not, or should we be doing the Greenwood Trust, or should we be doing, we're not doing that. We may have different opinions about those things, but there's a certain level of being able to take a step back and laugh about stuff like that. That's a sign of like, oh yeah, like we're tackling big things, but we're having fun while we're doing it. And I hope everybody across the city feels the same way.
Fair enough. Okay, so like you, this is my last question.
Oh yeah, there we go. I did it to you, so it's fine.
What's been your favorite moment of the past year as mayor, and what has been the most challenging moment?
Man, I think the favorite moment as mayor. So we had a event, a fundraising event, on December 2nd of 2025. So at the 1 year mark.
Yeah.
And my son, who I've always said I don't drag him around to a bunch of political stuff. Like you see me a lot, you don't see him that much.
Yeah.
And it's been true since I got elected in 2016 in the legislature. He's always said, it is up to me to show up to his stuff. Like, he don't show up to my stuff. And I'm going to live in his world. He didn't have to live in mine, type of a deal. And so I did not prioritize him coming to this event. He was like a 1 year deal and everything, which is really cool. But he did show up. And that child stood up there and gave the most amazing speech that I've ever heard. And I felt like I was floating. I couldn't believe it. It was like an out-of-body experience. That was my child, who I'm saying, me and him, we do a lot of things together. We have a lot of fun together, but I've never seen him do that. And he's in a room with a bunch of people who are all these leaders from across the community, and he stands up there with confidence and delivers it well. And the things he said about me, just it was easily my best experience
Proud dad.
over the last year. Absolutely. The toughest, there's been a lot of tough ones. And I think some of it's been just as much as you get to see the most amazing things happen around the city, you're also disproportionately exposed to things that are really challenging. And when you hear about some of these circumstances, or you meet the people, or you're on the phone with somebody who's been, who's had a family member who's been victimized by gun violence or something like that, those things are really, really tough. And so I've had that experience a number of times now. And I would say that's the hardest part about it. And whether it's the good thing, like, Gavin coming and, expressing his thoughts on me as a dad and the relationship we've had as father and son over the years, or it's the tough conversations that you've had with people who are at a really hard time in their life. The great thing about the spectrum of it is that it then all goes back to looking in the mirror, waking up and saying, you got to do the best possible job you can. Because on one end, you got this most amazing person who means more to you in the world, who is counting on you to get it right, and who's watching him if you don't think he is. And then all these people who find themselves in a really tough spot in their life, and it is not your job singularly, but it is your job in part to continue to walk with them to build a city where they can get better and better and better, in a place where their family may have been victimized. It gives you the level of purpose that I don't know if everybody gets to have in life, and I get to have that. I get to have it in part because I get to be mayor of the city.
Well, I think on that note, we'll end it there. I'm pretty sure, we know where he gets it from.
I don't know, man. He's better than I was at 17. I tell you right now, I was like, he's better football player, and he's better at public speaking.
Well, yeah, he killed it this season.
I know, man. I'm really proud of him.
Yeah. Well, Mayor Nichols, 1 year in, free to go.
That's right.
For the first term, that is.
Yeah, man. We'll see. We'll see.
Thank you
work
again
hard
for
at
coming
it.
on In Depth with Dion.
All right, man.
Appreciate
All the time.
it.
Yep, absolutely.